brought to you by the CFC Insider. We're Katie and Clint, and you're listening to another episode of the NCAA edition with Quincy Ford, who we're actually going to be talking about CFL Draft picks this episode. Quincy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're good. Just give us kind of what you've heard on the grapevine about what could or could not be happening with this CFL Draft.
This draft, it's obviously going to be an interesting one given, interesting year leading up to it, of course. But so we'll have the guys who are future picks, as in guys who are returning back to the NCAA for another year. I don't think anyone on our list today who we're going to go over falls in that category. But say guys like Mohamed Diallo, Dean Leonard, Patrice Rene, all those guys are being drafted this year, but won't actually be playing in the CFL if they end up in the CFL till next year because they're returning for another year. I think it was a pretty stupid decision to do that by the CFL for a variety of reasons. There's that. And then obviously the other interesting aspect is that U Sports guys haven't played since 2019. And in the case of one of our players today, 2018. It'll be an interesting draft.
Well, so let's get right at it. We're going to talk about Chuba Hubbard, which we've talked to death about this kid. He's Sherwood Park, Alberta, running back, 6 foot, 208 pounds. I went to Bev Facey, and then he finished off his NCAA career at Oklahoma State. We say that he's probably been the best running back that's come out of Canada. So what do you got to say about him?
The other interesting part about this draft class is the amount of NFL guys this year. So they're like 6 guys who seem like they could go in the NFL draft this year, which obviously alters their CFL draft stock. And Chuba Hubbard's one of them. So right now on my CFC40, I have him at number 4. The second edition hasn't come out yet, of course. But right now I have him at number 4 behind Javon Holland, Josh Palmer, and Benjamin St. Juste. Right now it's kind of looking like his NFL draft stock will be in the rounds 4 to 6 range because he kind of fell off this year. But obviously, as everyone knows, his big year last year, 2,000 plus yards rushing on the ground last year, team MVP, first team All-American, all that. But then this year, it's been brought to my attention. It seems he was coming off surgery coming into the season. And obviously everyone knows he was hampered with injuries this year. But it was interesting for me to learn that he was coming off a surgery coming into this year and obviously struggled and then got hurt midway through the season. And after only carrying the ball like 5 times for a couple games while blatantly limping, he then opted out of the rest of the season. But what separates him is his great vision. He has an ability to find run lanes, cut back, and kind of create for himself in that way where lanes aren't there, wouldn't be obvious to other top tier running backs, but he can find them. And along with that vision and his ability to find holes, his burst through the line of scrimmage is among it's arguably the best of any NFL running back in the class. The way he jump cuts, explodes on a dime right through the line of scrimmage, and obviously world-class sprinter, great long track speed, and home run ability is the other word I'd use to describe him, because I think he led the NCAA in 2019 and runs over 10 yards, runs over 20 yards, runs over 30 yards, and just so on and so forth.
Well, I know you had, you and I were kind of going back and forth, and you were sending me results of their pro days. And you at one point said that an unofficial time was for his 40, a 4.3 or something. And then they corrected it.
Yeah. So there was a report, I think one hand time that was kind of an outlier, got reported at 4.36 after his pro day. But then the official time came in at 4.48 on his 40. Among his other tests, he had a solid pro day, 4.48 40, 7.2 4.3 cone, 4.26 shuttle with a 10-foot broad jump, 36-inch vertical, which is pretty good, and then 20 reps on the bench press. And I saw a picture of him. I think it was like a before and after, and my guess is the first picture was, I don't know, during the season or something. And the second picture was like a couple days before his pro day. And you could see that he'd clearly been in the gym and put on a decent amount of muscle, looked more toned.
Well, he was like that. Remember, Clint, when he came out of high school, or when he went down, we were looking at pictures of him at Bev Facey, and then pictures when he was at Oklahoma. And we were like, who is this kid?
Yeah.
He totally transformed his whole body.
One day he looked like a skinny high school kid. And then after his redshirt freshman year, he looked like a linebacker almost. He was jacked.
Yeah.
He put on so much body mass. It was crazy. So
Yeah.
he has to fill out though. If he wants, like in the NFL, be somebody who carries the ball, a bunch of times in a game, he's going to have to fill out because 6 foot, 200 pounds, you may get by if you're kind of running back by committee, but 6 foot, 200 pounds and you carry it 25, 30 times a game in the NFL, you'll get completely beat up.
So other than any team in the CFL, who do you think he would be best suited for in the CFL?
In the CFL?
Like anybody.
Oh, he'll be a hometown guy if that happens. Like, I just don't see him getting drafted because all the CFL teams are going to be scared off by A, his pro day, and B, like his NFL possibilities. Like, I could see somebody drafting him, I don't know, in the middle rounds just because they think he's just going to, because there's no point in drafting him in the first round. Honestly, there is.
Yeah, I think the CFL draft is either 5 or 6 rounds this year. Like they shortened it from 8, I believe. Obviously, last year, there would have been Chase Claypool and Neville Gallimore were the 2 NFL guys. And Gallimore was like the 3rd last pick in the entire draft. And then Claypool went undrafted in the CFL draft. Hubbard might be worth a late round flyer if you're a CFL team. So,
oh yeah, take him in the 4th round. He's one of the best high school running backs we've ever evaluated for CFC. And he was always running parallel to Chase Claypool. I remember when we ranked them 1-2, and somebody from the Chase Claypool camp would continuously roast us because they would tell us that Chase Claypool was way better than Chuba Hubbard or Chuba, and we were like, no, not a chance. So, but he was the best running back I've seen come out of Canada ever since I started evaluating prospects.
I know you touched on like his potential NFL value, and I think the other thing to be said about that is I'd say the biggest step he needs to take as a player is he's kind of a brutal blocker, like not a very good blocker at all. And in the CFL, in the NFL, you kind of have that ability where you can have more specialized players. Like you can have like a kind of 3rd down back and all that, like more players suited to specific situations and specific skills. But in the CFL, where guys are kind of like out there like the whole time, you got to be able to block, run, and catch. Like Hubbard would have to shore up his blocking in either league really, but particularly that would come into play in the CFL. And if he wants to be a 3-down back in the NFL, that's something that would have to improve. He had 7 fumbles in 2 years as well, which is another thing worth noting. But I think when you have a workload that big, it's understandable.
Well, he was a track star, so
he's great when he has the ball in his hands. But what does he do when he doesn't have the ball?
Yeah,
exactly.
That's where his evaluation will be kind of rough. Let's be honest. He ran for 2,000 yards at Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
And didn't win the Heisman. Barry Sanders won the Heisman.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, yeah, because Barry's American.
I think Hubbard was 8th in voting or something.
Quincy, don't even get him going on this whole thing.
Joe Walker Award that year? Did he win the running back of the year?
Was it him or Jonathan Taylor?
Exactly. He didn't win nothing because he's Canadian.
Yeah, it was Jonathan Taylor in 2019. Should have been Hubbard.
Oh, wow. We're going to move on to the next prospect, Deonte Glover, another running back. I have him at 5'10", 210. We're not quite sure where in Canada he lived. We know he lived in Canada for 5 years. His mom is Canadian. He went to Musselman, I guess, high school, but now he was at Shepherd University, which is a D2 school, but he was formerly at West Virginia. So Quincy, you're going to have to fill us in on this kid.
Yeah, he's kind of one of those under the radar guys. The interesting thing with him is he was in last year's NFL draft class, but kind of same situation as I guess you're right now, really kind of like nobody really knew he was Canadian or whatever. So last year he wasn't in the CFL draft, but he went through the NFL draft, went undrafted, of course. And so this year he got entered onto the CFL draft list. And he was a guy who out of high school, he lived in West Virginia, but as mentioned, lived in Canada for 5 years, Canadian mother. He went to West Virginia as a preferred walk-on. But after a year, like financially, logistically, just wasn't right for him because he had to pay his way, and American school just costs a lot. So he made his way to Shepherd University, which is a Division II school, and he was a solid contributor for 3 years there before just blowing up in his senior season, where he went for 1,359 rushing yards on 200 attempts. So that's 6.8 yards per carry. And he had 19 touchdowns along with 385 receiving yards and 354 return yards. So he was at like 2,100 all-purpose yards on the season in 13 games, and I think that was good for all conference. I'd say he's pretty good all around. Good vision and instincts for a running back. Obviously, that receiving ability is a nice plus. I'd say of the 3 running backs on our list, he's the most polished as a receiver. And then special teams, he's also the best special teams player of the 3 running backs today because he's the first guy down the field on kickoff team. He's a gunner on their punt team. And that's kind of another thing that makes him stand out is as a Canadian guy, he's a guy who I think can kind of step into a number 2 running back role immediately in the CFL. And as a Canadian backup, that special teams value is pretty important. So you'll have your backup running back playing on special teams, which gives him some value there. There's also a pretty strong guy because last year's pro day at Shepherd, I don't know if it was actually at Shepherd. I think it was at Marshall, and he put up 25 reps on the bench press. So he tested all right for the rest of his stuff too. He had a 4.65 40, which I actually think he plays faster than that. And it wouldn't surprise me if this year, whenever he's doing his pro day, because he's at the CFL regional combine, although he should be at the national combine based on actual merit and ability, but my guess is just because he was a late ad, he's only at the regional combine. But I think he's faster than a 4.65, and not that a 4.65 is bad, but I think he'd be in probably low 4.5 range. I think is kind of how I'd guess his 40 would be off watching him. And I know in an interview he claimed that his fastest time to date has been a 4.46, but yeah, I'd probably meet in the middle there, maybe 4.5 range. Other than that, he had a 6.88 3 cone, which is very good, a 4.39 shuttle, 9.6 broad jump, and a 36-inch vertical at his pro day last year. So all of those certainly solid numbers, good pro day, some areas better than others. But yeah, he's my running back too in this CFL draft. But although Hubbard will probably be an NFL guy, which kind of pushes Glover up to my number 1 running back spot in this CFL draft.
Well, we were just watching his film earlier today, Clint and I, and I would say he looks a lot faster than a 4.65.
Oh yeah, he bursts through the hole.
Yeah.
But he's also hitting the hole.
Yeah, he's a guy with some home run ability as well. I think all 3 of our running backs are home run hitters as rushers.
Oh yeah, he exploded through the hole a couple of times. Like he's in the second level before, he's on top of the free safety
before anyone even knows that he's there.
Not only did he take it up the middle and just outrun everybody, there's a couple where he took it down the sideline and he broke not ankles but broke angles. Defensive players had legitimate angles, and he outran them. So he was super impressive. And now that you told me that he plays special teams and returns kicks and covers kicks, that's a pretty good deal.
I managed to find full games of Shepherd University, full Shepherd University games in their 2019 season. The thing with him is he's kind of inconsistent. I'd say what you see on his highlight, he has the ability to do that, and super impressive. Obviously, his highlights are extremely, extremely impressive. But after watching his games and his highlights, I'd like to see him kind of down to down, game to game, bring more of that the explosive side of him all the time. Sometimes he just kind of looks less intense, or you just want to see him bring that consistency on a down to down basis. And on that same front, it took him until his 5th game of the season to rush for over 40 yards. So he started the season very slowly, game to game and down to down. Sometimes he just looks like he's not into it on occasion. Well, I shouldn't say not into it, but certainly not as into it as he is in his more explosive plays, where he looks like just an absolute force to be reckoned with. But yeah, I'd like to see him bring more of that down to down consistency.
Well, the kids can become a CFC prospect ambassador to help put your high school football team program on the map by displaying your personal profiles on CanadaFootballChat.com. We're offering a pool of prizes for all CFC prospect ambassadors as they help the Canadian football community continue to grow. So how does it work? Get 11 teammates or more to submit their personal profiles to the CFC prospect database. And you can find that on CFC under the Submit Your Profile tab, which is on the prospect search. Then you can find your teammates' profiles on CFC and submit their profile ID numbers, which it will prompt you to do. Then you collect your prizes after submission. And the more teammates that sign up, the better prizes you receive. So, Quincy, the next running back we have is Kyle Borsa. He's a Saskatchewan native out of Regina. He's 6 feet, 200 pounds. He's super explosive. I know that we remember him when we were ranking him back in 2017, I believe. But he was a phenom in high school. Do you think he can repeat that in the CFL?
Yeah, I certainly think he's a guy who's promising as a prospect. I think he's, as you said, he's very, very explosive. All three guys I'd consider very explosive today, but Borsa might just be the most explosive of all of them purely as an athlete. Like, he just had his pro day this week and ran a 4.3840, which would be near CFL combine record setting time, along with a 6.96 3-cone 4.19 shuttle, 10.3 broad jump, 35-inch vertical, and he put up a very respectable 22 reps on the bench press. But yeah, the thing with him is he's had some time off, as in 2018 was his last year playing football, although he's still on Regina's football team. But just because of the circumstances, 2020, they did not have a season because of COVID. But 2019, he was actually suspended for banned substance use, which was the use of hegenomine, which was in a pre-workout all max impacted night, it's called. But yeah, it's like just a normal pre-workout you'd see at the store, but it actually happens to have a banned substance on it. So that got him kicked for the 2019 season. He was not allowed to play. But back in 2018, he had 631 rushing yards on 96 attempts. But the thing is, with him at the time, if you think back, he was only a sophomore at that time, and he was in a two-headed rushing attack for Regina, along with Atlee Simon, who's, I think, one of the all-time leading rushers in their program. But Atlee Simon would have been a fifth-year guy, and Borsa was a second-year guy. So Borsa actually only started 3 games, although he participated in all 8. But he only started 3 games when Simon was hurt. So that's why the rushing yards count was not as high as it could have been. But he would have certainly been the best running back in U Sports this year, I think. But yeah, 631 yards on 96 attempts rushing, along with 227 yards receiving and 482 return yards, which is another very impressive stat there. Mm-hmm. And that set the single season school return yards record. So that's how he was in 2018. Also won team MVP as a sophomore, which is extremely impressive. So
yeah. What do you remember about him, Clint?
Well, what I remember him was like the best player coming out of Saskatchewan that year with regards to like just an overall. I think we might have ranked him as an athlete. I can't remember. But anyways, he was like, he played slot, he played running back, he played free safety. And you could see even back then, he was like super fast. And he looks like one of those like super well-built dudes who's like super twitchy and like fine-tuned. So, but yeah. And he just like the fact that he was a team MVP in U Sports as a sophomore, when you had a 5th-year like career-leading rusher in front of you, that says quite a bit. And the pro day numbers, well, they speak for themselves as long as they're accurate. I know everybody's doing like virtual right now, or they're doing like some sort of hybrid combine presentation or whatever, but like those are legitimate numbers. So I wouldn't be shocked to be one of the top running backs drafted. I just wouldn't. He was so athletic in high school, and obviously he only got to play 2 years. And let's be honest, when you play college football, your freshman year is most of the time a wash, but not very often is the second-year player the team MVP.
Yeah, I figure I'll say it now because I was talking to you guys about it before the podcast. But yeah, I took the liberty of timing Borsa myself while watching because all of his pro day stuff was on film.
That's dedication right there, Quincy.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Got the laptop out, got the phone out, and just sat there timing stuff. So, but yeah, I know all his time seemed like very legitimate, because when I was timing them, I actually got like 0.02 seconds faster on all this stuff. And yeah, so I watched that. I know his 40 was also laser timed as well. But yeah, just it certainly looks like it looked legit. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, with him, I'd say at the second level, I'd probably call Borsa the most elusive of all three running backs on this list, despite the fact that Hubbard's an NFL guy. I think Borsa's little like his little jab step or little speed cut, kind of like his little change of direction, just slight cut there, like kind of like it gets people like absolutely frozen. Like when I was watching his highlights, it was pretty crazy, just freezes people. And another guy, obviously, with breakaway speed, another one of those angle breakers, and looked like he had solid hands and obviously tested well. But yeah, I'd say for him, I don't know if these aren't weaknesses, but I'd like to see him as a like route runner and his blocking, because those are two things that weren't on his highlights. It looked to me like I saw a couple catches, but it kind of seemed to me like those were like, in terms of the route he ran, were more kind of based on him just being athletic and fast rather than actual any technical refinement there with his route running. So I think that could be a next step for him. And blocking, I don't know if he's good at it or not, just because I haven't seen it at all. But the thing with him is at 200 pounds flat, that's a little light. So blocking could be a concern for him if I were just thinking, which is a reason why I'd like to see it.
Guys like that can bulk up though. They can, if he's only 6 foot, 200 pounds. He was a really good DB too in high school. So like guys like that, because of their body types, you can do a whole bunch of stuff with them. And if you tell somebody like that, who's that, say he's that like athletic and that genetically gifted, because he'd have to be to put up the numbers that Quincy mentioned, telling him to like go put on 20 pounds, you get up to 20 pounds, we're going to keep you as a all-purpose / fullback / special teamer. I bet you Borsa would show up at training camp 220 pounds and play for his hometown Riders.
But yeah, I'd say for him, obviously the other thing there is I'd like to see him on special teams too, because I didn't get to see any of that. And as a backup Canadian running back, that's an area that could like provide value there. And I'd say of the running backs, he's probably kind of the least physical. Hubbard might be, but I'd say Hubbard was also playing at a higher level than Borsa. Yeah. So I'd like to see Borsa maybe a little bit more impressive, like tackle breaking type stuff. But obviously he was a sophomore last time we saw him play. I'd just like to see more of them.
Going into our fullbacks, our last two prospects, we've got Bruno Laval. He's 6'4", 248 out of Montreal, Quebec. Played at Momo. And then Natty, he's a big physical kid. He's probably a fullback H-back type in the CFL. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, he's a guy who he redshirted his first year at Cincinnati. But I think like since his sophomore year, he's played quite a decent amount, although he stepped into an even bigger role this year. But as a blocker, he's been on the field quite a decent amount over the past few years. But yeah, for me, he's the number one fullback on the draft board for me, 100% in this year's CFL draft. And I managed to also hunt down on the note of my dedication, managed to hunt down some Cincinnati offense game film on YouTube as well. So I got to see some full games of him, watched like 3 games last night. I liked him a lot, actually. He's kind of, obviously, in terms of mold, he could fit in the CFL. Like you said, that fullback H-back type, kind of reminiscent of Nikola Kalinic in terms of the role he could fill in a CFL spot, because Kalinic came into the CFL and was immediately one of the most impactful fullbacks for Hamilton as a second round guy out of York. But yeah, Laval can be effective in pass pro and as a run blocker. I knew he could run block, because otherwise he wouldn't have been run blocking for all these years for Cincinnati. But his pass blocking and pass protection actually impressed me a lot when I was watching. And it seems his hand placement is great. He always, like, it just seems like immediately like right on the chest plate, right on the outsides of the chest plate every single time. And he's very consistent with that hand placement, and his timing's always good with his hand strikes. And yeah, as a run blocker, he keeps his feet driving. Just a very all around technically blocker. And in pass pro, he has a wide base and quick feet. And as a run blocker as well, he can get to the second level. Like, say he finishes one block, he's not one of those guys who finishes a block and thinks his job's over. Like, he finishes his block and then immediately looks for the next guy he can get to.
Do you remember him? I don't really remember him.
I remember he was like, I'm pretty sure he played inside receiver in CJ, but he was a really, really good athlete. And then when he went down there, I remember him, he wasn't that ridiculously heavy, but he's obviously put on quite a bit of weight in his 4 years or 5 years at Cincinnati. Did he ever get an opportunity to catch many passes at the end? I knew he was always kind of a blocker or a run blocker, or did a lot of the dirty work that a tight end would do. Did he ever catch many passes at the end?
This year, through 7 games, he had 10 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown. But yeah, like I was kind of expecting, like, in going into the film, I didn't know how much, like, kind of skipping through plays I'd have to do because I didn't know how much he's on the field. But he's on the field like 75% of the snaps for Cincinnati.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's obviously promising, being on the field that much for what was this past year a top 10 school in the country. Through the 3 games, I don't know if it's something he's just not asked to do, but I didn't see him cut block anyone at all. Like, I didn't see that. Probably just isn't asked to do it. I'd say the difference when comparing him to someone like him and Nick Kalinich, Laval is certainly more athletic than him. At his pro day recently, he ran a 4.7 40, like 4.7 flat at 250 pounds. Yeah. Along with 7.36 3-cone, 4.43 shuttle, 10.3 broad jump, put up 19 reps on the bench press, which is solid. And then his vertical was a very explosive 36 inches at 250 pounds. Oh, so that matches any one of the three running backs we had talked about today. He matched there. He's a little bit more maybe technically refined as a pass blocker than Kalinich. More athletic, would probably bring more as a receiver, route runner. He's not as violent as Nikola Kalinich in finishing his blocks, which is something I'd kind of like to see, because Kalinich looks like, I'd say, a bit more of a madman out there, which is something I like a lot about him. The other thing for him is I went and checked PFF to see his snaps on special teams. And the past couple of years, he's been on the punt coverage team and the field goal unit. And as a sophomore, he was on kickoff team. I think that was it for special teams for him. But I'd like to see that film of him on special teams to see if he's the same special teams player Nikola Kalinich is, to continue like running with that comparison, just putting them side by side, because that's a good little frame of reference there. I know Kalinich was an absolutely phenomenal special teamer. And just because I haven't seen Laval, that's another thing I'd like to see from him, because that's something you want your fullback to be doing.
We're going to go into our last prospect, Felix Garand-Gauthier, another fullback, 6'2", 225. Another Quebec kid out of Mirabel. He went to Lionel Grew and then Laval.
Felix was actually, I'm pretty sure he was a quarterback in Cégep. So that's another little twist there. And he was a quarterback. And I think he's actually attempted a couple passes in like the red zone for Laval. So he can, I don't know, maybe bring that to your offense, little trick play or something. I figure I'll go back a second and say, like, just as a reference, because we're talking about draft guys, where they're at on the CFC40 board right now. Because I know I said Hubbard was at 4, but just forgot to mention for the last 3 guys. Right now I have Glover at 30 and Borsa at 36, along with Laval being at 21. And Garand-Gauthier, he's a guy who, he's not on my CFC40 right now, but if it were a CFC45, he's a guy who would be on it. So just to give a little frame of reference there. But yeah, I watched him, and the thing that stood out to me is another one kind of like Kalinich, super aggressive, violent player. They share that. But yeah, I like Garand-Gauthier's intensity and aggression out on the field. He can stand up and he can go and pass pro. He can run block and gets to the second level just like Laval does. But yeah, pass pro, run blocking. He cut blocks a lot in pass protection. So that's just another thing he can do. But something that kind of concerned me a little was I saw a few blocks on his highlights that I think were a little questionable in terms of, like, they probably get flagged, like hands a little too far outside. Kind of looked like he bear hugged guys on a couple of them. The other knock on him is he's a guy who I don't know if he would have wanted to go back if there's a football season this upcoming year, but if they hadn't switched the rules to make an exception for guys to not age out, he's a guy who wouldn't even be eligible to go back to U Sports next year because he's 25, and I think in like the fall or something he turns 26. So that's another downside to him, is like compared to other guys in the draft who are like 21, 22, like he's 25, 26. He was a second team All-Canadian.
They always have fullbacks. There's so many of them who go on and they play like tight end, H-back, they're long snappers. Even Bruno Laval, like Bruno Laval's from the island of Laval, but still just another Quebec kid. Laval always has fullbacks. It seems like half the fullbacks in the CFL are from Quebec. I was really surprised, like out of the list we talked of today, like there's 3 legitimate backs who could step in and actually be like legitimate backs, like actually get carries and get playing time. I know Chuba won't end up there, but it'd be interesting to see where Deonte Glover and Kyle Borsa go. I think Kyle Borsa will be one of my sleepers in the draft.
Put Deonte Glover in that category just as much, just with how much he's flown under the radar too.
Well, he's had a whole year off. Like he didn't just like not play football because of COVID. He was like out of eligibility, right? When we looked at the name, I actually texted one of my buddies in the CFL and asked him about him, and he didn't know about him at all.
Well, that's a good list, Quincy. Thanks for talking about those guys. And when is the CFL draft?
May 4th.
Well, the NFL draft's what, April 29th?
The NFL draft is always 1 week before the CFL draft for that specific reason. CFL purposely plans their draft after the NFL. And there'll be some draft picks where you're just going to be like, what the hell was that?
I have a feeling that's going to happen. Like I'm just going to be sitting in front of the TV.
I'm curious because this year I'm gonna follow that even closer than when I did the 40.
If you want to find out what these rankings are that we're talking about, you can go to CanadaFootballChat.com under the rankings tab, but you will need a gold membership, CFC Insider membership, in order to access all of those rankings. The CFC40, which is the U Sports and NCAA rankings. We've got the CFC60, which is your CEGEP and JUCO rankings. The CFC 100, which is the high school rankings, and CFC 10, sorry, those are the specialists. And we are introducing a new ranking this upcoming week, the CFC 30. So you'll have to tune in for that and see what that's all about, especially those of you in Quebec. Thanks, Quincy, for coming on the show and giving us all that great information once again. You're a star, man.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, he says, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know.
Well, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, @ChatFootball, Instagram, CFC_football, and YouTube. And don't forget, like I said, to purchase your exclusive CFC Insider Gold membership today for access to rankings, analysis, and daily football recruiting news across Canada. This has been the Recruiting Masters, brought to you by the CFC Insider. That's it for us today, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Recruiting Masters.
Looking for more exclusive Canadian recruiting content? Become a CFC Insider Gold or Silver member today for access to rankings, analysis, and the latest recruiting news from across the country.